History 2323, lecture overview in the interwar period. This is the time between World War I and World War II. Okay, the U.S. is involved in world activities. You'll see here some treaties, but usually they're considered isolationist during this period, which isn't really an accurate assessment. So they have this conference in Washington in which there's three treaties. The one I want you to know is the Five-Power Treaty, and that's going to limit the size of your Navy. The Secretary of State at this event will be Charles Evans Hughes, who is Secretary of State for Warren G. Harding. Then Kellogg, Frank Kellogg is the American, Briand, Aristide Briand is the Frenchman. In 27 will create the Kellogg-Briand Pact, which will basically outlaw offensive warfare, which again looks great on paper, but does not. I think initially 14 nations, eventually 60 nations will sign on, but it won't have much enforcement because both Japan and Germany are signatories of this particular document. The Stimson Doctrine, Japan's first aggressive act will be to take Manchuria from China. And Henry Stimson, who is Hoover's Secretary of State, we don't do much except for say we're not going to recognize the new Manchuria, which becomes called Manchukuo. If you look on a map, you can see it. So it's basically a policy of non-recognition. Hoover will start the good neighbor policy towards Latin America, then FDR will take it to another level. And we do support American dictators who like us. And these are three families. You should note the names: Somoza, Batista, and Trujillo, which will cause us problems way later. As the world begins to ratchet up for war, you're going to have Mussolini attack Ethiopia and take it in about a year and a half. That's going to produce what's called the Neutrality Act of 35, the U.S. Neutrality Act of 35. Then the Spanish Civil War will produce another Neutrality Act. This will be Franco versus the royal family of Spain. Franco will prevail by 39. And then Japan's second invasion of China will be in 37. And this will be, some will call this event, if you don't call the 31 Manchuria incident the start of World War II in Asia, this will for sure be the start of World War II in Asia. Fascism, you can read through these. I think these are terms that are going to be throughout your chapter. Kristallnacht of Broken Glass. Okay, remember 70% of the Jews of Europe by the end of the Holocaust are gone, wiped out. Here's Franco, who will prevail. We do have Americans volunteer to go and fight Franco. Hemingway will be one of those in there. So I think there's about 4,000. And then the rising power of Japan will be under these two men. I misspelled that. It should be Hirohito, and then Hideki Tojo will be the two key leaders as we get ready for World War II. Japan, in that 37 event, will attack in the north at Beijing, but they also will attack it from the ocean at Nanking. And they will round up somewhere around 300,000 Chinese and basically execute them. There will be, if you've ever seen the movie Schindler's List, you know that there was a German inside of Germany who hired Jewish prisoners to keep them alive during the Holocaust. Okay, in the same realm here, you have a German doctor who will bring Chinese civilians into the diplomatic sector of Nanking, and that will prevent them from being executed. Franco, I told you already, won in the Spanish Civil War. In Ethiopia, this is the Ethiopian leader that is overthrown, Haile Selassie, and that's going to be a line of leaders, emperors in Ethiopian history that go back to King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba having a baby. Germany, you've got Hitler's moves. The Rhineland will be first. This is in 36. Nobody does anything. And then in 38 or 37, but he'll take Austria without a fight. Then he'll take the outer rim of Czechoslovakia. which is called the Sudetenland. That's where you have the Munich Conference, which will produce the Munich Agreement, which will give part of Czechoslovakia to Hitler to satisfy, to appease him. Within 6 months, Hitler takes the rest of Czechoslovakia. FDR is also building up in the background the military, knowing that probably it's going to be war for the U.S. at some point. Hitler will officially start World War II in Europe on September 1, 39. So we issue this Neutrality Act again at 39. France falls within 5 weeks. You have the Dunkirk evacuation. And then you have a prolonged, almost year-long Battle of Britain, where the Royal Air Force, the British Air Force, will take on the Luftwaffe. In June of 41, Hitler, for unknown reasons, decides to give up on Britain and turn his war machine to Russia. So right before the invasion of Poland, Hitler and Stalin had signed a pact, and so now that will be violated. Britain is hurting, so we will give them 50 destroyers for 8 military bases in the Caribbean, a lease on them at least for, I think it's 99 years. We also will, before that invasion of Russia, we also will offer Lend-Lease to our allies. So it's massive aid begins to pour into the allies, and Russia will be recipients of that aid as well after 41. Churchill and FDR meet off Newfoundland in 41. FDR's, rather than having 14 points, we have 4 freedoms. So the first 2, freedom of speech, freedom of worship, and then freedom from want, freedom from fear. We also send convoys over to help the British, and then we get into the war with the December 7th attack on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese. Here you can see, I'll just go through this real quick. You can see, so it starts the Rhineland, then Austria, the Sudetenland, the rest of Czechoslovakia, and then Poland will be the official start of World War II in Europe. Then you have Sitzkrieg, nothing for 6 months because it's going to be winter till the next spring. Then you go Denmark, Norway, Holland, Belgium, France falls. Vichy France is the new pro-Nazi government set up in France. And then the Battle of Britain will be ongoing until June of 41 when Hitler turns his sights on Russia. Okay, once Pearl Harbor happens in California, they begin to round up Japanese, and eventually we round up 110,000. We put them in relocation camps. You could join the army and get out of that, but you had to fight. This is going to be the all-Japanese American unit called the 442nd, a highly decorated unit, and they have to fight, though, in Europe. They're not allowed to fight against the Japanese. So, but we are in World War II, the arsenal of democracy. Women are doing an incredible amount of the work, so that's where Rosie the Riveter comes in. All Americans are contributing, and this war is unique in that there is, because fascism is so evil, and what Hitler and the Japanese were doing was so evil that there was no opposition to this war.